DeRoy Murdoch with me this morning. I think it's sad to see the president go out like this. I don't care what you actually think about him. It's sad to see a president leaving the stage like this.
It is sad. You want to see a president, whether you agree or disagree with him, walk out with some sense of grace and dignity, at least for the office. We don't see that here. We've seen inflation, home, illegal aliens coming across the border, instability around the world, and of course he lost the White House. So I'd say, yeah, that sounds like failure to me. As far as the pardon of Hunter Biden, I don't think anyone's surprised by that, which is kind of sad. I think everyone heard him say, I'm not going to pardon my son. I thought, oh, he's lying. He'll pardon his son, which he did. A little surprised at the timing. I thought this would be around Christmas time when this usually takes place. Yeah. But instead, it's now, and he's flying off to Angola, kind of like an octopus disappearing into its own ink.
Listen to this. This is a column written in today's New York Times by Brett Stevens. Headline is, A Disgraceful Pardon. This is in the New York Times. If Democrats want to understand one of the reasons the Republican Party is ascendant, they can look to President Biden's pardon on Sunday of his son. In its rank mendacity, political hypocrisy, naked self-dealing, and wretched example, it typifies what so many Americans have come to detest about what the MAGA world calls the swamp. That's the New York Times.
And that's something. Now, I think Biden could have said, I love my son. My son's been through a whole lot, given his addiction problems. I want to be merciful on my son, therefore I'll pardon him. Leave it at that. But then he went further and said that this is selective justice and that this is all political vendetta. This is his own Department of Justice that went after his son on gun charges. There's also his Department of Justice that did not prosecute him for not paying taxes, I believe, in 2013, 2014, or 14 and 15. No taxes at all. They dragged their feet so that the statutes of limitation could lapse and you could get away with paying zero taxes. How many of our viewers get that kind of service from the Department of Justice? I don't think many.
Zero.
Probably about zero, yes.
Thursday, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are going to meet with Republicans on Capitol Hill. A group of former United Nations, this is interesting, United Nations officials, they say they're launching their own DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, for the United Nations.
Remarkable.
How about that?
How about that? Well, this is the Trump effect. He's not even in office yet, and you're already seeing the UN reform itself. I'm glad they're meeting with people on Capitol Hill on Thursday, and I'm sure they'll talk about agencies that ought to be shrunk or eliminated. But they're very simple process things that can be done. It might not even need legislation. For example, it's very boring, wonky stuff, but zero-based budgeting. Instead of taking the budget for an agency and saying, like, let's put more money on top, you've got to justify its budget from the first dollar and have the head of that agency, the secretary or the head of the agency come in and say, I'm defending my budget from the very beginning, and you therefore question all the spending, everything they do, rather than just saying, okay, here's everything you've done, we're just going to pour gravy on top of your previous spending and activities.
That's going to have quite an impact, isn't it?
Zero-based budgeting, yeah. Not a very exciting idea, but one I think could have a real impact.
Yeah, but if they actually do it...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why is it not done? Private companies have to do this. I remember when I worked at Ogilvy & Mather, every year we'd have to sit down with our clients and our executives and say, okay, here's the new budget. Why are you spending this on radio? Why are you doing this on newspapers? How much are you spending for talent? You don't just say, okay, here's last year's budget. Here's 10% on top of that, which is what they do in Washington.
And all these agencies, they're going to have to respond to Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's probably the most effective tool in cutting spending and regulations that this administration has.
Probably the most we've seen since the Grace Commission under Ronald Reagan back in the 1980s.
The Grace Commission reported, and they had various things in mind. None of them were implemented.
He didn't have complete control of Congress. You had Tip O'Neill standing in the way in part. But also, since then, we have 40 more years of government waste, government fraud and abuse, and a much greater sense that the government's out of control and a much deeper appetite for reining it in.
Maybe this time Musk can do it.
Let's hope so. If anyone can, it's him, along with Donald J. Trump.
I can't think of two better people to put in charge of this initiative than Elon Musk and Ramaswamy, because they're from the private sector. They're not taking a salary. They're not interested in getting a federal pension someday. They're interested in doing the right thing for the taxpayers and for the American people. And if they have a Congress to work with them, we're going to get some things done.
This can be really interesting how it works. Ready to clean house. Some already celebrating the D.C. outsiders to lead the Department of Government Efficiency. Elon Musk on X earlier today. I still can't believe DOGE is real, but I think it's actually going to work. With us now, someone who knows the tech titan better than any of us. His mother is Mae Musk with a new book out called A Woman Makes a Plan. Good title. Good morning to you, and thank you for your time.
Good morning.
What has he told you about the transition so far?
Well, I went to Mar-a-Lago for a gala, which was really fantastic. Everybody was so excited and happy and glamorous and just we just see a better future. So that was just a wonderful evening. And then the next day we spent, and I kind of sat down while he had meetings, which I love, because then they were talking about what they're going to do. And Vivek was there too for some of the meetings. And I just sat listening, and I thought, well, I can't tell anybody what they're saying, except now it's all over X and all over the news. Yeah. So at least they're telling everybody. And they just can't believe how many buildings are empty, how many people don't go to work, how many people don't know their colleagues because they've never met them, they don't see them, they don't know what they're doing. And then they joked and they said, oh, I bet they're using COBOL. So now that's very funny for tech people.
Yeah.
For me, I had to look it up.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's like the old systems.
Yes.
And it must be shocking for somebody who is so advanced technologically to then go to the government and say, what are these things that you're using? It's interesting that the idea of government efficiency, it comes up over and over again. But there is some hope that this time it could actually make a difference. And Fareed Zakaria from CNN thinks it's possible. Watch.
Wow.
In fact, a good part of the rage that has built up among parts of the Republican base over decades has been centered on the notion that party leaders have promised repeal again and again, but never delivered. With DOGE, we may finally get an effort to actually deliver on the central Republican promise of the last 70 years. And we will find out what America thinks of it.
About how your son, Elon Musk, has been told many times, this will never work. It could never happen. That's impossible. And he's like putting rockets into space. This is something that he can do?
Yes, and it's going to be quite easy because they're going to, start with what did you do this past week, and then also come into the office. And just those two will eliminate a lot of people, and rightly so. Because if you didn't have to come in and prepare things, it makes things much easier.
One thing I was thinking about, there are a lot of alpha males in that room. I mean, between Donald Trump and your son and Vivek and all the others, how are they going to make this work?
Oh, they're going to make it work. Yes, they're all on the same page. There's a lot of women, of course, as well, that will be involved. And they all have the same goal to make America economically viable again,
And Susie Wiles there is the chief of staff to make sure everybody stays on task. So your book is called A Woman Makes a Plan. And one of the things I saw you say is that you never planned to leave the Democratic Party, but they might have left you. Adam Schiff is a Democrat who just won, he's a congressman, I'm sure you probably know, now just won his Senate seat. Watch here what he says about blame.
For too many millions of battleground voters, working people, they don't think we represent them, and we have to make that case anew. I think the entire Democratic Party bears a responsibility, myself included, and the former president. The existential question is, if you're working hard in America, can you still earn a good living? And too many people doubt that that's possible.
And so the Democrats are trying to find their footing. You talk about making a plan. Do they have one?
Yes, they... I don't know what kind of plan they can have, because the media has to change and the politicians have to change and stop being mean and nasty and dishonest. Because, as I say, they used to always hate on Elon for 15 years, but I trusted them with the other news, where they hated the Republican Party, they hated Fox News. And then I realized, no, they are dishonest in all aspects.
I've watched a lot of your interviews. You were a registered Democrat, right?
I was, okay. Yes.
And you called them malicious and dishonest.
Yes.
And then you said, they'd say Elon is terrible, and I'm thinking, why are they lying about Elon?
Exactly.
That was your change?
Yes, that was, just that they actually made it even worse for him. And then I said, well, maybe they're lying about everybody else as well. And it made me angry. I used to actually post people who duck the New York Times, CNN, or MSNBC, and the journalists involved, and say, shame on you, but nobody cared. And I'm talking about 8 years ago I was doing that. And it will change now.
So this book is called A Woman Makes a Plan. I'm excited to read it. What do you think is like some of the top 2 messages in here for people who would be your reader?
First of all, at the age of 76, I'm on your show, and
Yes.
you can still be smart and active and working a lot. And then also make your children independent and responsible for their own choices, because that's what my 3 kids do.
And that's in the book. You have something
Yes.
there. Yeah, I can't wait to read that part of it.
Yes.
May Musk, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm glad to know that you're
Nice
in New
to see
York.
you.
We might call upon you again. It'd be good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Thanks, May.
Tesla CEO and co-head of the new Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk, is calling for the elimination of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, writing on X, quote, delete CFPB. There are too many duplicative regulatory agencies. The CFPB was created as part of the 2010 Dodd-Frank Act after the financial crisis by Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren to oversee parts of the financial industry that interact with consumers. Some say the agency is highly politicized, damaging and unaccountable. During Trump's first term, he took steps to neutralize this agency, easing its enforcement of the banks. Musk also is asking users on X if the IRS should be, quote, deleted after the agency said its enforcement fund is $20 billion short after budget cuts. Biden's Deputy Treasury Secretary urging Congress to, quote, pay up. You can see in that poll, over 60% of X users said they think the agency's budget should be deleted. John Lansky, your reaction to that. Let's start with the IRS.
Okay, the IRS could be run more efficiently without any question. Maybe their technology is dated. They could update in that sense and help save money and better serve the American people. I don't know about completely eliminating the IRS. What's going to take its place? My goodness. What are you going to have? Private tax collectors like they did back in biblical times?
I think what he's talking about is eliminating Elizabeth Warren.
Right.
We're talking about the CFPB. So, I mean, that's okay. Elizabeth Warren, she came to fame. She became, Miss TV darling, so she thinks, after the financial crisis. Remember this, okay? I remember this. But that's all she's been able to hang her hat on. That was the financial crisis was 2007, 2008. We have moved on. I don't think that she has. And I would argue that there's enough regulation on the books with the banking industry that you actually could eliminate that agency.
It's the best thing in my 20-year career in government, I've seen this many, many times. And this is a very healthy discussion to have right now.
Yeah.
And what it does is it says to the existing agency, so how are you going to justify your existence? Sing for your supper. But then it also begs the other question. If you eliminated it, would you need to replace it? And that's really the zero-sum game that you have to take a look at. What are we going to do if we don't have this functionality? But to your point, Cheryl, this is an agency that has all of the regulatory responsibilities handled by other agencies. It's not like if this goes away, suddenly the U.S. consumer is going to walk into a bank and say, pay us 20% interest. No, that's not going to happen.
Mike is making a great point. What he's speaking about is redundancy in the federal government.
Right. Yeah.
When we have redundancy in the private sector and corporations, what happens? Certain departments, jobs get eliminated. And maybe there is room for a lot of cutting as far as agencies are concerned and individuals.
Well, I mean, look, I got to go back to this Elizabeth Warren thing because her entire political mantra has been greedy corporate. She's gone after the banking sector for nearly 20 years now. And I think that Musk makes a great point that maybe time is up for her. Now, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget is trying to help DOGE make cuts. They say the federal deficit could be slashed by $1.4 trillion over the next decade by reversing some of President Biden's executive actions. Now, their report notes, unlike most reduction measures, reversing costly executive actions would not require congressional action, true, and could be done through the rulemaking process. The CRFB says up to $550 billion can be saved by eliminating Biden's plans to forgive student loan debt, including the Save Income-Driven Repayment Program, which could save up to $275 billion alone. $385 billion could be saved by targeting Biden's health care executive actions, $180 billion by reversing changes to the SNAP food stamp program, $150 billion from gutting vehicle carbon emission rules. That's a long list, John Lonsky.
That is a long list, and unfortunately, you're probably going to get some opposition because there are people that are benefiting from these regulations. Okay, they're benefiting from this spending. They don't want to give it up.
As in private businesses and industries, or are you talking
I'm thinking of the auto
government
industry.
employees?
The auto industry has perhaps spent something like $120 billion on investments in being able to produce EVs and the batteries that go into electric vehicles. They're not going to want to write off $120 billion all that quickly. So
the EV mandates, though, no one has bought electric cars. The consumers rejected it. The EV mandates are just nothing but, I think, just government handouts and you know who's not benefiting from that? Elon Musk, of all people.
Yeah, he's going ahead and he's pushing for the elimination of these subsidies that buyers of electric vehicles get. So this, I mean, you can't say that he's doing this for his own benefit. That's important to note. He's trying to help the United States out, and maybe with his genius, he could go ahead and pull something off where we do get this $1.4 trillion reduction in the deficit over 10 years.
I mean, $2 trillion. I mean, that's what when Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk first started talking about this, it was $2 trillion. Now, the mainstream media is scoffing at them.
So what shouldn't be lost is their approach. So notice how they're going after executive orders, as opposed to we're going to try to get the Congress to reject what they've done beforehand. So because they can go, if you go after Congress and you try to say, pass a law that takes out these existing laws, very, very hard to do. Yeah. Whereas if you go into the executive orders, Donald Trump comes in and says, I can do this unilaterally. Obviously, he'll need support from the Congress.
Fiscal responsibility in Washington. But can't say it enough, guys.
Right.
Fiscal responsibility. Let's go.